Hi everyone, welcome to this edition of Scale Up Thursdays. And this time we have a panel which is slightly different what we typically have. So typically we have trainings on different topics, tech topics, but this time I felt that it might be good to talk to different startups about their own lived experience. Um, and uh, and so today's series, founder series, we are going to talk tech with startups. A little bit about the topic. The webinar will consist of founders sharing their stories of challenges, triumphs, and lessons learned through their entrepreneurial journey. And we have the following founders as part of the panel. We have Maksud-Ul-Alam, co-founder and CTO of CommEngine from Bangladesh. Rohit Shukla, co-founder and CTO of Legitquest, based out of India. And we have Lakshman Pasala, co-founder of Neverinstall India. The webinar will cover a description of startups, product, tech stack, how to grow your team, top challenges when scaling technology, and securing infrastructure and data. And we'll also talk about a little bit about how they use Azure to build their products as well. I'll just do a quick introduction of the founders, and then I will, leave the floor to them to maybe do a short intro about, what their product does. So I'll start with Maksud. So Maksud-Ul-Alam is the co-founder and CTO of CommEngine. With his 16 plus years of professional experience, he has developed more than dozens of enterprise level applications and worked with several renowned companies. Having participated in several software startups, he's a seasoned software development expert with a deep understanding of the importance of software in driving businesses. About CommEngine, CommEngine is a social CRM and customer growth solution for brands and businesses. It is data-driven and AI analytics focused customer profiling company operating on social and retail data. Over to the next founder, we have Rohit Shukla. So as I said, Rohit Shukla is a co-founder and CTO of Legitquest. Rohit has more than 20 plus years of experience in the technology industry with organizations like Theseus, Wipro, Fidelity Investments, and in various B2B product development practice management roles. Prior to venturing out in the startup world, Rohit was CTO India of LexisNexis, the world's largest legal research SaaS company. His role in leading the setup to product launch and commercial readiness of legal research products for Indian SCA countries, Southeast Asian countries. LegitQuest is a legal tech startup which aims to create India's most comprehensive legal database, which can be used for legal research, legal due diligence, and corporate legal decision-making scenarios. Right. So I think, yeah, his expertise in this area has definitely helped in building up that startup. So he comes with a lot of experience in legal tech. And the final founder we have on the panel is Lakshman Pasala. Lakshman Pasala is the co-founder of Neverinstall. He has over 9 years of experience in building products across logistics, ad tech, e-commerce, and deep tech sectors, and is currently building technologies for the next generation of personal cloud computing. He founded Neverinstall in 2019. About Neverinstall is a cloud platform that allows you to run any application from the browser without installing it on your device. It's an alternative to traditional desktop application usage and enables people to stream applications over the web. The aim is to bring a fundamental shift in the way applications are used, eliminating the limitations of hardware and making them truly accessible from anywhere, especially important in this work from anywhere kind of environment. Yeah, so welcome everyone to this panel, and looking forward to the interaction. Maybe we can just quickly go around and talk a little bit more about the products that you're building. We talked a little bit about in the intro, but if you can just give me like a couple of minutes about what your product does. Maybe Maksud, you can go first.
Yeah, actually, thanks Vinayak to give me the chance. Actually, our product is CommEngine. It's actually a social CRM and customer growth solution for brands and agencies. We're actually working on social data and also in retail data. So those brands who have the social presence, they can use our application, and we are actually collecting all the customer information, generating leads for them, also doing different kind of segmentation for further marketing. They can also operate some campaign using different channels such as SMS and email marketing, leveraging our CommEngine platform. So we are also generating different kind of analytics based on data. So their CXO level can making different decisions for their organization. So these are the actually main functionalities.
Cool. Rohit, do you want to go next?
Sure, Vinayak. Thanks, Vinayak, for having me on this panel. Great to share my experience, whatever I can, and add value here. Definitely would be good. So Legitquest is a legal tech venture, and we are a SaaS company, essentially a data as a services kind of a platform. We have collected pretty much all legal cases, orders, case law, acts, rules, regulations, everything for. We started with Supreme Court and High Court, and then we are working on a district court level also and tribunals also. And that data we have collected, and what we are doing is kind of insight into that data. So we all see lawyers. Whenever we imagine a lawyer, there is this stack of books which they are deep into working on those. And that is what we are trying to make it easier. So easier to find the content they are looking for, easier to get the data, whichever they find, the hyperlinking between those data, because there's a lot of cross connection between these data. So that's what we are trying to build here. Of course, the product is there in the market for last 3 years. And yeah, so it's been adding more and more data. And right now we are working on kind of a product which is more insight through analytics, which is party name analytics, and some of those details are there. So that's what we do here, and we are based out of Gurgaon.
Lakshman?
Hey Vinay, thanks for the intro. So Neverinstall we've been working on for about a year and a half, and so the primary reason why we started working on this was basically when we started realizing that collectively on a day-to-day basis, everybody is making these decisions as to which apps to keep open, right, and which apps to close, because hardware is always something that is limited. And that's when I remembered an ad that I saw in my childhood about Intel around multitasking. Intel with Pentium 4 promised multitasking, but that promise has remained a promise. And what I realized is that the the nature of what a computer is supposed to be is something that needs to change. And that's when we realized that we need to extend the definition of a computer from what is hardware to these elastic cloud computers. And that's what we've been working on over the past few about a year. In fact, later today, we have our product hunt launch. Lots of new features that have come up. So yeah, it's an interesting problem statement because it's good that like we are one of the first people working on this problem, but it's also bad, okay, because a lot of times there's nobody to look at. So very first principled approach to all the problems that we come across. So yeah, good to be on this panel. Thanks for inviting me.
No, absolutely. I think I keep saying it, when I talk to startups, like our industry is like the fashion industry, right? Whatever is old becomes like new again after a few seasons, right? So what you just said, right? Especially I think that was demonstrated in COVID as well. I mean, for example, Sun Microsystem used to say that the network is the computer, right? And we have this like client server technologies, and then this shift back and forth again, and we are again in that phase. So very interesting thing. So great to have all of you here, and I think we have a good representation of different kinds of technologies. So with that, maybe we can talk a little bit about what does your stack look like? What programming languages do you use? What kind of frameworks do you use? What kind of databases do you use? So maybe we can just go around and give a sense of what do you use, because again, like very different kinds of problems all three of you are solving. Rohit, you want to go first, maybe?
Okay, I think we can keep the standard format of Maksud, Rohit, and every time we just keep doing that, so that you don't have to ask that every time.
Sure, Maksud, yeah, go on.
Yeah, so when we start developing, as you know, as startup, we have some limitation of budget. So I start lonely, but our first choice is Microsoft stack. From the initially, we start using .NET stack. and we are leveraging the .NET Core C# for API level. And in UI part, we are actually using Angular. And later, when we deploy our app, we found that there is some scalability issue. As this is a SaaS application, so when client is increasing, so for go-to-market, reducing the go-to-market time, initially we developed as a monolith. So later we break it as a microservice, and then we wrote some microservice in Golang, and we try to use some NoSQL database such as Elasticsearch. And so we are using .NET Stack, C# and SQL Server, Azure SQL, and also Elasticsearch in the backend. And front end mainly Angular.
Okay.
So these are the current stack till now.
Okay, interesting. So you're also multi-language stack. That's interesting. That is some one trend that I'm seeing. Like you have Golang and .NET. Rohit?
Yeah. So we have a history. When I started this venture, so there was another partner who had already started it. Like he was like 2 months into the business, and then I came on board. And so she was not a tech guy. And what happened was we got hold of a developer who is a .NET developer, and he built a monolithic application. There is a database, there is a UI, and then you search on that. Basically, that is what it was. Everything was in one big server, one big database, everything, right? And it was .NET stack again. What Maksud said, similar stack we had. So one of the first thing we had to do was, as a tech person, is to break this monolithic structure. The other challenge is definitely the resources, the money available to us, right? So how do we solve it? So we started breaking it up into smaller components and more like a API based consumption, basically. So it was not true sense microservices, I'd say, but yeah, definitely we started moving the application. So we moved the login and the user authentication and access control part. So we got a smart PHP developers. So Lab was the stack on which that component was developed. And then similarly, we started having our backend system through which we manage the data. Again, we got a LAMP developer, and that person started doing those things for us. And we started integrating these applications. So that's also. So we ended up with a Microsoft, and then the biggest component was the search has got bad. Of course, on a database, it was running on a SQL database. So Elasticsearch came into picture. So we put the Elasticsearch there. So there is a database which from SQL Server we migrated to MySQL because of the cost reasons, essentially. Elasticsearch, APIs, and all these applications which were surrounding. So that's the way it was. Now we are working on some backend data processing, analytics, and data wrangling kind of activities have come in. So there we are using Python also.
Okay.
So that's in a nutshell is what we are doing. Yeah.
Interesting. So .NET, you have
PHP
PHP and Python.
Python, we have
And
Elasticsearch, we have,
also
and we have somewhere in between there is a MongoDB component also is there, basically.
Interesting.
Yeah. Because we have various data sources. Our thing is it's not a static, it's a very dynamic. We keep getting new data sources and we have to develop an application around that. And it really, primarily it's the cost of the resources, availability of the resources which derive it. And so we don't want to get tied up with one stack, actually. So that's what we're doing.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions, but I'll let Lakshman speak and then we'll go a little deeper into that. Lakshman?
Right. So for us, it was primarily, so what we decided is that first let's look at the landscape. So we like front end, let's go with React because market mein there's a lot many React developers available, right? Yeah. And so from there, the choices of tech stack on the web app side of things were React, Next.js. Again, so these were stacks that I personally had worked on for 3-4 years on, and we realized this is something that we should be comfortable getting developers from the market. The other thing that we realized is to understand how we want to do our go-to-market and the cost of it. And we felt there's going to be quite a significant amount of cost. So there was that one decision that we made from the very beginning is that we will not use any cloud provider managed solutions. right? Because we didn't have the money for it, so we were living off of credits, and we like take it. So we would have to say jump from one account to another account. So, but the thing is that that one decision helped us significantly over the years because it allowed us to look at things from ground up. Okay, where there was every week or so issues around networking security. So our tech stack is primarily on React, Next.js. Databases, we use PostgreSQL. We also use uh, GraphQL on top of it. And we also have a columnar database called ClickHouse. The other languages, which is the core streaming server side of things, are Golang and C++. So, and these are the things that we've been comfortable. One thing that we were very conscious about is that yes, a lot of the initial systems would be sacrificial, right? So we decided that we'll sacrifice it as and when we get better, and over the say 6 months ka timeline, okay, one by one we sacrificed one in favor of something which is more reliable, and that sort of helped us be grounded in the sense we did not want to go over the board with something that we know for a fact won't work for us 6 months from now or 9 months from now. And everything was very modular because the systems were again being sacrificed every 2-3 quarters. Yeah.
No, great. I mean, that brings me to the next question, right? Like, I think one of the things when I talk to startups, and in fact, even just talking about my own story, right? About we talked about multi-stack. So prior to Microsoft, I used to be the CTO of Zoomcar, right? And there we started with Ruby. And once we started building some of the heavy components behind the scene, then we kind of transitioned some of the pricing, some of the inventory solutions that we had over to Java, and then eventually we were one of the early users of Go language. This was about 5 years back, and it was a bet that kind of worked on the IoT, right? So we had also a very multi-language stack, and obviously we also had like Python and other things for the backend. But I think in terms of the serving software, it was mostly like Ruby, Java, and Go language. So that's actually when I talk to startups, I tell them that I think there are so many different axes on which tend to kind of select the stack, right? One is obviously the skill sets available in the market, your own background and expertise. What the problem domain also demands certain kind of stacks, right? Like especially if it's a lot of like data processing and maybe it's not that heavy on the front end, something like Ruby or PHP works really well. Whereas in the case of Neverinstall, it's very backend heavy in that sense, and probably something like a static compiled language, works. So generally I tell them that, choose like a dynamically compiled language, especially the front end and, kind of glue software, and then choose like a statically compiled language for, some parts of your backend. And you can start with one and slowly kind of transition to the other. So I wanted to, especially I think you and Lakshman and Rohit, both of you talked about one aspect that I want to kind of, expand on, like talked about, how you started in some sense like a monolith, or, you build system and, like I said in the famous book, The Mythical Man, like, you kind of build and initially, and then as Lakshman said, you threw away. So how did you do the transition to microservices? What were the challenges there? Because I mean, every startup as it grows, you realize that, okay, this part of the code base is not working as well it should. Maybe the language is not right in some case, or in some case, the way the modularization is done is not, in the right way. So maybe I'll start with you, Rohit, a little bit.
So, okay. So see this migration, see one of the serious driving factor for in our case is that when we choose something that we want to move this login system, say access control system to LAMP stack. So there is a developer who has been working with us. We are aware of that person, that this person can take care of the job. So that's number one thing which is there, because you don't want to get halfway and you figure out that the person has or the team has got out of the depth. Basically, there is one person who can drive that piece. Basically, that's one. The challenge, the biggest challenge, in our case is what we call a common thing is changing the tires of a car when the car is moving. So the requirements are changing every day. So we are a fresh, new, young company. We are trying to move certain set of piece into a new application which we are trying to launch, but the new requirements are coming through. The new kind of so to give you example, we had a user ID password based access is there, and suddenly these corporate law firms they want IP based access, and you know what? So our requirements are already in place, development is going on, and IP-based access becomes a core requirement. And then there are certain set of users or corporate, they say they want IP-based access, but they want also the user, so these are the requirements which were unseen, and suddenly they are coming through, and you have to keep refining those requirements, developing the systems around that. So for that, at certain point, actually, we took a pause, and what we did was we did a study of the applications which are in market, how the companies in internationally are doing these things, because a lot of times the business users were not aware of the kind of requirements they need. So rather than banking on the business users, we took a lead and we kind of went into the international market, understood how the products are working, and built those things. And you know what, today it is really serving us very well, because that time when we said a mobile app would be there and everyone says no, we don't need a mobile app, lawyers only want to work on books, laptop is the best they can get into, and today everyone is asking for mobile. And since we created this system, so you know what, we don't have to throw those things. It's touchwood still working for us, it's scalable, and definitely it's modular basically. So these are the some of those experiences perhaps I can share here.
Sure. Lakshman?
Yeah, very similar to what Rohit mentioned. So initially, what we did, as I mentioned, we saw to it that the design pattern, right, the manner in which we would write code, right, would allow us to just move things around from one place to another, rewrite the same logic in whatever language, in whatever framework, right, and as long as that is there, we are okay. So with that, the way that we started was understanding, okay, some of these APIs need not be on the server side, because these may be completely moved to microservices, right? So one by one, look at what is the bottleneck and keep moving them. So the languages may not have changed, right? It's the same Node.js code. Instead of running on a server, it's running in a Lambda function, but it offloaded this logic completely, right? So nothing was synchronous in that manner from the very beginning, right? We saw to it that everything is asynchronous, systems are communicating with each other, and we manage the state in some centralized database. So that sort of allowed us to keep iterating. One of the things that we do very often is some existing system is there. How much of our time is going in maintaining that or fixing that or patching that? Okay, if that is happening repeatedly, okay, offloading is required. So one of the first things that we offloaded was auth. We won't do authentication.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense. So offload that away. Right. Yeah. Then there were very similar things around a couple of other systems and APIs. It doesn't make sense for all of this to exist in this, say, a lot more frequently changing piece of code repository. Right. So move those away, because the moment you move those away, okay, you're paying less attention, and they get meddled with a lot less, as opposed to this rolling release that is happening every day or so. So that way, if you look at I don't tell that to my team, but I look at the repository commits on a day-to-day basis, right? Which repositories the commits are often, etc. And based on that, it allows me to make this decision, okay, which week we need to work on which systems.
Yeah. Okay.
Interesting. Yeah. So this is another example that I give, right? So when you do rewrites, especially, or you scale the system either because of scale, either due to the quantity or the qualitatively, as in in some sense, either the business and the product changes, or you kind of build new features, or the scale of usage of the systems increases, right? And so this is a concept in I would say Roman or Greco-Roman mythology called ship of Theseus, right? So ship of Theseus says that there is a ship, and it's built of wooden planks, and as it is going into the sea and getting used, the wood starts rotting, right? So you kind of remove one wood plank at a time, and then maybe like throw it away, or you keep it aside. And over a period of time, what happens is one by one, I think all of the planks of the ship change. So now, like if you, it's a classical paradox. So if you have kept those like wooden planks separately and you build a new ship out of that, and you have a new ship which is already kind of functional, which of them is the original ship, right? So is it like, so it's like the ship of Theseus, right? In some sense that you have rebuilt like part by part. So while the functionality in some sense to the external user, the interface has remained the same, internally, I think the ship has completely changed because you have replaced all of the planks, right? And this is an example like you in terms of rewriting, and I think both of you illustrated this like really well. So one of the important components when you do all of this is that I want to touch upon is deployment, right? So I want to, and every startup struggles with it, right? Because I think the focus initially is in building products, in building features, in building lots of different things, to address the market. And DevOps is that thing that at least initially does not give you an edge, but as you start scaling, as you start pushing more and more stuff, if it is not done well, I think it kind of stands in the way of doing stuff with velocity, right? So maybe we can just quickly go around and understand how do you kind of take care of DevOps practices, how did it evolve, what kind of observability and do you have built in instrumentation you have built in the system? Maybe Maksud, do you want to go in the same order?
Yeah, actually, when we start developing, initially we are deploying manually. That time we don't have those kind of option to hire some DevOps and work on it. Then after initial deployment, when you go to live, then start using, you can say, some of the Azure functionality. Suppose I build manually and using the Azure deployment process to deploy it in the Azure, as we are using the Azure platform for our application. So when we go live and we found that there are actually customer using our application, some issues are coming abruptly. Sometimes we need to deploy some hotfix quickly, and sometimes we need to actually deploy some feature, and also taking care of it that our application should not be broke. So at that time we actually building our pipeline, deployment pipeline. It's the automated CI/CD. So what we did, actually, our developer developing something, they provide some pull request, and after reviewing the code and managing, maintaining everything, is okay. When we approve this pull request, it's actually deployed automatically in development environment. And after testing in the development environments, then we deploy it in staging. And after passing this staging, then we deploy it in production. So this is actually a deployment pipeline we set. So now, so it's easier after deploying this pipeline, and we have to deploy regularly. So initially it was okay, but without it, it's very tough to manage deployment.
So, quickly, I also wanted to know, do you have like automated testing as you kind of move through the stages as well?
In pipeline, we set we are doing writing some unit test. In pipeline, when they build it, they check this unit test. If any test is failed, that it is not deploying. So we fix the test and then build it again, run the pipeline again.
Okay, great to hear that. Rohit, you want to go next?
Yeah. Okay. So we have a slightly different take on this. So one is we are a B2B company, right? Our user base is pretty defined. It's not like very wide, basically. That's one, and it's a database thing, basically. So in our case, what's happening is that our core platform, to a large extent, is stable. There are not too many changes coming. We are not providing an existing platform. When it's there, it's there. We don't kind of do too many changes on that front, basically. Database is where the things comes because we do the cross-linking of the data. A new graph is being coming up on the same kind of a data. Those kind of a stuff is there, and that is where it's actually, if you see from a deployment perspective, we have pretty much everything is manual right now. We have perhaps if you ask us from a DevOps perspective, it's just now we have started moving on that journey. In fact, immediately after this call, we have a team meeting to kick off some of those processes which is there. Having said that, from a preparedness perspective, what we started doing was that the core features, we started having the test cases being prepared so that we have the test automation in place. That's the first piece actually we wanted to have that whatever we do, whether we have a complete CI, CID or not, but we should have the automated test cases in place and test automation. So that's something for each of those components. We have started doing that. And having said that, for the data, actually, it's a business case, basically. It's really a business users who have all the control over the change in the data because there is a backend functionality and they can just go and if they find some data is not functioning that they want, they actually make the changes themselves. So it's a kind of upside down, basically. That's the way I put it. And DevOps, the deployment is pretty much manual in our case right now.
Also, I think when we were talking about this initially about the panel, I think you also mentioned one interesting point in terms of the deployment model, right? I think you have a combination of on the cloud and also on-prem, right? Because of the sensitive nature of the data that you are handling. So how do you take care of those parts? So, like for example, do you have cases like for example where customers are asking for specific features? Do you have that kind of issue? If not, I'm very sure that you're going to get into that.
So you know what the kind of issues we get is not from a feature perspective, but in fact, yesterday we got a court case because there is this divorce case is there and this case is on our website and it's a publicly available information, but the people cannot really sue the High Court. It's a Rajasthan High Court. They cannot sue it, but if it is coming on our website, and the problem is whenever a user, customer actually search for a name, for their name, our website comes on the top, and the case it's a very negative kind of operations person would go and remove those cases, basically. I think I talked about that basically. So that is something which we get a lot of those things. We are taking certain strategic decisions on that front also because of the data privacy guidelines which are coming in India. It's right now in the parliament. That bill can get passed any moment, and when it gets passed, it becomes a law. So we are actually working on putting all our data behind authorization. So right now it's a freemium model which we are working on, but perhaps it would become a completely paid model to avoid some of these data privacy kind of stuff also. But that's a very different story than what the original question you asked about the deployment front, basically.
We'll go a little deeper into that on the security aspect, but I think I'll go over to Lakshman, before we dig a little deeper into that.
Yeah, for us is pretty much very similar to Maksud. So the way that we evaluate it is again, I'm a big fan of those green ticks, right? Whenever green ticks happen, right? So it saves time, and in fact, I believe by design a lot of these say DevTools companies and products, okay, they're conditioning developers with these green ticks because it gives peace of mind. That at the end of the day, every say DevTool company, say DevOps company is selling that peace of mind to the developer, right? That this tick mark means okay, it's done. And I don't need to worry about whether things are like if I'm doing it manually, okay, I have to remember things. Now I don't. Okay, I've done it once. Okay, then that particular tool takes care of it. So all our CI/CD pipelines are on GitHub Actions, and it saves a lot of time. I mean, it also allows us, like me personally, to ship even if I'm not in front of say a laptop or a desktop, right? Mobile say I'm able to ship, And that sort of ability is something that in the initial stages we care about more. The other things that we were doing is so there were a few systems where we were able to build the pipelines fairly quickly and easily. Then there were a few systems where we were manually uploading the zip artifacts. That also we like, let's just spend a weekend, because green ticks are always the best. It's either all at once or it's failed. And the other thing is that everything is containerized. So the tools available these days, I mean, it's better to offload all of this to them as opposed to doing it manually, because one of the things that matters a lot for us is the order of deployments, right? And that is something we can control a lot better with some of these tools as opposed to if we were doing it manually.
Because of the interdependencies between, I think, microservices, I think they need to be, I think, started in a state where it's like consistent and, can talk to each other. Yeah.
Correct. And the other thing is that there are certain systems that get the fresh files or the updated files on runtime, right? Okay. And now we are a platform where the average session duration is like over 35 minutes. So there are users, and there are automated over-the-air systems running on like while the user is active that take care of all of these. So that sort of kept us grounded when we were shipping, right? Because these were a lot of things we did not really do well in the initial days, but over time we got really better.
Very interesting, especially the last fact that you pointed out, that sessions are longer. I think in most cases, right? I guess, for example, in like maybe Rohit's case, right, you would have that maybe lots of users logging into the night, especially if you are based in the region, right? So you have a small window to do upgrades, but in your case, if the sessions are longer, I think that I would say the resistance or propensity to failure, I think, is or a tolerance for failure is like very, very small, right? So that introduces complexity. So I just want to actually change tack a little bit and kind of expand on the things that we talked about on the security side of things, right? Like Rohit touched upon it a little bit. So I'll start again with Maksud, with you. Maybe tell us a little bit about how you handle security, because you get a lot of customer data, especially sensitive data, right? Because you have like retail customers and customers data also, especially it is like personally identifiable information. So how do you handle security in general? What are different aspects, like whether it is over the wires, in transit or on at rest?
Yeah, actually, we are accessing lots of social data, and some social data means there are some personal data also. So also this social media like Facebook have some rules. They actually provide us the data using two level of encryption. So we are actually we are storing this type of sensitive data encrypting in database. So those are we are encrypting those values, so no one can easily access those. So these are actually our database level security, and also as we are developing some APIs. So in API we are using OAuth authentication, a token-based authentication, and some implement throttling, and as in microservices talking each other. So that's why we also implement API gateway in microservices, and try to deploy it in private networks. So from outside, no one can access it. And these are the main part. And also in some sensitive data, we are storing those sensitive data in Azure Key Vault, and it's a secure platform actually. So these are the main part. We try to ensure security.
Okay. That's it. Yeah. So in our case, in terms of the sensitive information we can talk about is pretty much the contact information. That's the kind of information that we have basically. Of course, these are in a virtual server. the access is through PEM key because this system is outside the main system. As we talk, most of the data is in a different system, not in the main system, and through a PEM key, only these servers can be accessed, so no other person can actually access it. Whatever data is on the front end which the users see, that's publicly available. That's, as I said, freemium model. So we don't have to really worry from that front. So that's the serious distinction we have. Of course, the data is encrypted. The password data which we get, users' password data, that's all encrypted. So even we cannot see that data. When they request it, we have to rechange it. We don't send them the password. That kind of a thing is there. You know what? Having said these things, I have a different problem. Our problem is that we put so much effort and money in getting this data, and there are these companies. Okay, I won't call them competitors, but there are these people who are scraping that information from our website. That is where our challenge comes, because since the data we have made it freemium, it's available free without any user ID password. So these users are coming and just at the go, they start scraping our data, which has two-pronged effect. One is our hard and effort is going, and the other is it's closed on our server. You know, suddenly there is this huge load on our servers, and we start facing issues on that front also. So for that, we have a manual intervention now that a specific IP address, if is there, we get a notification on that front, and immediately that IP address is blocked. So it's a very quasi manual kind of a quasi automated kind of a thing, where whenever we see a lot of download happening, a trigger gets automated, we get a SMS notification and a WhatsApp notification, and immediately there is a set of rules defined to stop that. Automated, this cannot be done because this could be an actual user also in their case, basically. So these are the things actually, frankly, we are doing in terms of securing our infrastructure and securing our customer data.
Cool. Lakshman, you also handle a lot. I mean, because customers are like remotely, accessing application. I think there's a lot of data that you do get about, customers, and especially the usage in addition to the PI, which is kind of unique in your case, right? So how do you handle, those parts?
So, I mean, of course, around security hygiene, a lot of things that we did were like quite straightforward and standard around rotating the database passwords. Then again, token-based auth, everything is based on permissions. Tokens get expired within a set amount of time. Right? So keeping that aside, and of course, network and the firewall rules, right? So all of those, right? What you spoke about, that is a very unique challenge for us. And the way that we do is, again, there's no set product out there or rules that magically tells us something, but there is, of course, a lot of tooling available on the observability front, right? So what we started doing over the past few months or so is put observability across all, if not most of the systems. And then on a, say, weekly basis, okay, we look at the stats. Of course, there are alerts that, and in fact, based on that, we were able to create alerts, right? What is abnormal and what is not abnormal. So there, so Azure's internal alerting also is something. I mean, most of the cloud providers provide, right? Because that is something that everybody should just get done, right? Basic alerting on, say, number of requests, CPU load, right? So the moment you, so because the first thing to act, to do anything is to be informed, right? So we have alerts across all the systems, and then we look at the trace logs, and with that we build systems that essentially take a sample of, like, again, processes or CPU, right, over 5 minute samples and determine, okay, whether this is abuse or not. But of course, yeah, this is something that we've been just recently working on, but maybe within another few quarters we'll get a lot better on this.
Cool. Cool. So I think we have talked a lot about tech. I want to kind of change tack a little bit and talk about, as a scale startup, I think tech is one part, whether it is the stack itself or the strategies that you use in DevOps, security. But I think the most important component to all of this is people, right? So I want to kind of touch upon that part a little bit. How do you, what has been your like hiring strategy? How do you retain people? How do you grow people? Maybe tell us a little bit more about that aspect. And if, as initially, at least like, as you start off, I think that is a bit of a struggle getting in the right people. And then I think once you have got in the right people, then retaining becomes an issue. And then finding more of the same, kind of people becomes an issue. So I think people is a very, having people who kind of, contribute to the mission is a very important part. So maybe we'll go in the same order again. Maksud, maybe you can comment on, what have been your strategies so all of us can learn from you as well.
Yeah, so when we start, I start developing lonely to develop the prototype. So when after we actually going to hire, when we first able to manage our pre-seed fund. So initially we hire one developer and try to grow him. So later when we found that we need to make more accelerate to deploy the product in production, then we hire some other people. So actually we try to maintain open culture in our company, and anyone can, I believe, they can learn and grow fast. And we are very open, such as before COVID, in our companies, it was permitted to work from home. So what we see that actually the work is done, not how it is done. It's not very important. The main part is if it is done, it is okay. So we are very flexible, and our culture is very open and developer. And also we try to. And initially it was not there. We were documenting our processes and try to document our technology stack in different learning source. And we are using Confluence for processing everything. So when new developer come, they can easily understand the process. They can easily just read it and understand how we follow the process, how we implement it. So we try to document it actually when with working. I believe here a developer can easily grow their career.
So yeah, I think takeaways for me would say I would think like open culture, and also you hired freshers and kind of grew those people as they learned. And I think a very important part which is kind of I've seen a lot of startups don't do this well is like documentation and onboarding, right? To kind of ramp up people very easily once they join. So I think those are the takeaways for me. Rohit?
Yeah, so in our case, again, very similar to what Maksud said. It's an open culture. We have, even when the office is open, we don't have timing. So there is this time you can come in and work. And right now we have opened our office and it's like 50%. So it's alternate days people are coming to office, but a lot of tech people instead. So we are flexible in terms of giving work from home, even if they are. So office is open there, but they cannot come. So those flexibility is always there. So that's one part of that. In terms of ramp up, again, what Maksud said, we actually focus on freshers and junior hires because. So one of the thought is actually, and this is right from my corporate days, is when we try to find that perfect fit. You know what? Even if you get a perfect fit, there are at least 50% things which that individual has to learn when they come on board. So you can only evaluate for the tech part, but the way you work, the product, and all of those things, the individual, the people interaction, all of those things they have to learn. So what? We don't go for a 100% fit. We go for a person who is willing to learn. It's for the attitude. It's not for the experience, because when you're hiring a junior person, you can always train that individual. And the other thing is, uh, as long as the right attitude is there, the person can be, productive somewhere in the organization. Because we are a startup, there are so many things to done. A person may not be good in one specific thing, but the other one, or the one. There's so many things we can try and find a right fit for the job and the individual fit basically. So that's something which we put a lot of effort on. The third thing is I come from a development background and I understand it that developers don't want to do documentation. So we hire people who are kind of, we call them product analysts, but these are the people who kind of work as an interface between the team, between the requirements and the developers. And one of the tasks which I keep repeating in every meeting is developers are not supposed to do documentation. They don't want to do that. So please take all the documentation from them. So we do the documentation, but a different individual do those kind of things for them, basically. Some of these things and the atmosphere which we create helps us retain the people. We have been good actually in terms of retaining the people. But yes, we are now ramping up because now the challenge is coming is that the team is growing, the products are growing, and the processes are not really set as per that. So you know what? So some of those things we are doing, but the basic fabric of how we operate is going to remain the same.
Absolutely, very interesting. I think a lot of the developers maybe on this call or who are seeing the recording will take notes about not doing documentation, because I have also faced that when I was a leader, that people don't want to do documentation. I mean, um, everybody understands the importance. So it's like when all of us as children want to play cricket, but you either most everybody wants to do batting, nobody wants to do fielding. So
Yeah.
it's that kind of a thing with with developers.
Yeah.
Lakshman, maybe your thoughts a little bit on on growing and retaining and people.
Right. So, in fact, hiring engineers is actually one of the toughest things for any startup. The climate is actually quite competitive. So, what we've been doing is we've been very open and upfront about the manner in which we operate. That is, we are looking for people who come with a buy-in, right? And of course, there's a process. Okay, that there are stand-ups, daily stand-ups, but again, there is no set timing that you need to work for X number of hours. Okay, just get things done. Okay, and you do that because you want to do it. Okay, not somebody has told you to do it, right? And that sort of and all the discussion that we have is a function of that collectively we come to a consensus and give that buy-in. Okay, so this is what each of us will do. The other thing that I saw is, if say one engineer is working on one system repeatedly over months, right, then for that person he might feel okay, maybe bored or stagnated. Okay, because engineers have this knack. Okay, I need new challenges, growth, right? So the other thing that we do is we have these monthly catch-ups, and uh, I try to get a sense of, okay, the things that keep people exciting, right? So as long as you have a pool of engineers, uh, and each one is working on different systems, right? You can always rotate, okay, and give that sort of exposure. So that's why from on day one, I tell everybody, engineer banna hai, developer nahi banna hai, right? What that means is that you get to work, okay, on every system, and of course you have your expertise and interest, right? But you get to know that this is what you would like only after trying everything else, right? So those are the things. The other thing that we do is, while hiring in the very first intro call, we don't ask past CTC. We ask expected, right? Because we like, okay, past CTC. Again,
Yeah.
we don't know. We don't want to judge. Okay, you
Yeah.
tell me, okay, and based on that expected, we'll evaluate you
Yeah.
on the process, right? A lot of times we had to say no because the expectations were very different. But the moment we get the conversation started with that, and we are evaluating, and the person is also doing that evaluation against that number, it sort of helps us understand, okay, that the cost of this resource, is it justified, right? And the other thing that we do as part of the company culture, we don't have annual appraisal, because we don't believe somebody needs to wait 12 months to, when that person clearly has been doing, taking more work, more ownership. So any n number of times, as and when things are happening, right? So what I tell everybody is, if you have found out a formula that can be repeated, right? that means, okay, now it's time to move on. Okay, because for us, and I guess most of the early stage startups, formulas that sustainable formulas that can be repeated. That is what matters, right? And if people have gone through the journey and come to that stage, we need to reward them. So a lot of times, engineers don't even ask, or like people don't ask hike. We do it ourselves, right? Because it's time to move on. So those are the few things that allowed us to retain. Right, hiring is more around like coming up, like giving that faith, right? So we do 3-4 calls, and sometimes we even ask them to join us for a couple of days, where we pay them. Right, it may not work out, right? But they get to know us, we get to know them, right? So those are the few things that we do.
Very interesting, a very interesting approach, right? In terms of so we saw that Maksud, Maksud's team has a very different approach when it comes to like so I think in some sense I think Maksud team why has that documentation is capture that organization knowledge. Right? That's why you need to kind of have that documentation, right? What if a person quits, or even if not quits, right? Starts working on a different product or is unavailable. How do you capture that knowledge so the other people can do? And Lakshman, you have a very different approach and you kind of tied with, you're rotating people within different systems. So while there is like a steep learning curve, I mean, there's no like in some sense like single point of failure, right? We are very fond of saying as engineers, very fond of saying this in terms of architecture, but also it's very interesting that how you have applied that to people as well, right? So that part is definitely, fascinating for me. So I have, I'm just conscious of time. I mean, obviously, there are a bunch of other things that I want to talk about, but I'll probably take a couple of questions, from the chat. So if, if the audience, you have any questions, please put them in the chat. This is the right time. So there are a couple of questions. One of the questions is, what are the mechanisms that you're doing to minimize the latency of data traveling through API with multiple DBs, right? I think when we talked about the stack, I think a few of you are using like maybe Mongo or NoSQL and stores, and also like Elasticsearch and maybe like Postgres or SQL Server or MySQL. So how do you tune that part? Maybe we can start with Maksud. How do you do maybe in general? I think the question can be interpreted as maybe database or database optimization or latency minimization, right, for data round trip.
Latency, actually, we try to deploy it mainly when using Azure or other cloud also have AWS. So we try to deploy these in same regions for latency purpose, and also regularly need to a SQL Server. We regularly need to be updating the indexing. Also do some partitioning regularly for data related part, and some history data. Some history data we are using partitioning for history data. So later what we did, we found that as we working on some big data, and there is some issues in searching and other part in SQL servers. Then we moved to actually Elasticsearch. It's performing very well in actually when you do some analytics and searching based work.
Rohit, Lakshman, do you want to add anything to that?
Actually, it's pretty much similar. Actually, as you say, in terms of the server location for us, actually, it's a government guideline because it's an Indian case data, so it cannot really reside outside India. So it's based out of the Mumbai region. Again, the same thing about we moved from SQL Server to MySQL to eventually Elasticsearch to take care of the latency issues. And of course, we try to clean up our data in a way that the data size itself, that's at the foundation level, but we try to structure it in a way that the data which is traveling is lesser and it's required and we have broken it down basically. So there is a search component, there is a listing component, and there is a detail component. So because of that, the user doesn't notice those differences also.
Good. Lakshman?
Yeah, so very similar things as they suggested. Maybe one thing, so the way we evaluate is how often that data might change, right? and how often do we require that. So we were actually in a very similar situation. So what we decided is that since instead of querying to different databases, let's have a separate system that basically gets that information in something like Redis, right? And the system that requires that this data just picks it up from Redis, right? So the job becomes much simpler. That those databases are not overloaded by these long queries or slow queries. Of course, with any SQL database without indices, okay, you will not be able to scale. And what's also important is to I mean, very common. Okay, people say understand how the schema should change. Okay, get rid of say database tables which are not being used or columns which are not being used. Okay, do those performance tuning and cleanup. And yeah, the other is region. Yeah, so if possible, keep everything as close as possible.
Yeah. So quickly summarizing, I would say I think keep the data as close to the user and the infra also close to each other. That is one. I think another point is probably like caching and partitioning, which different panelists touched upon. Third thing I can think of is good indexing, and also I think the two biggest things that can help you in terms of reducing is like choosing the right tool for the job, right? So like if you're searching, for example, use Elasticsearch, and as you scale, I think that will scale well. Because you can do search in a database also, but it's not the most efficient way to do that. Yeah, and I think also other few strategies that I have personally seen and used is also separating out the reads and writes, and separating out like the analytics part of it, or the read heavy part of it, typically, as analytics is very read heavy. And another thing I think which different panelists also touched upon is figure out how to transform your data model as the business changes, right? That kind of gives you the most bang for the buck. Because if your data model is good, and you know how your data accesses work, then you can figure out what to cache, what to partition, how do you structure your data, how do you manage dependencies. So all of that actually, so if you understand your data model and work on your data model and evolve it well, and now I think most frameworks, like whether it's PHP, Ruby, Go, all of them, Python, all of them have frameworks which support migrations, right? So if you migrate from different schemas, that really helps. And probably I think the last and final point that was not mentioned as much here, but possibly useful, is like something like use materialize views for historical queries as well, right? So in addition to partitioning with Maksud actually mentioned, I think especially for analytics, I think materialize those views works really well. There is one more question, I think, on real-time noise cancellation in speech recognition, but I don't think it's very relevant to the discussion here. But Chiho, if you can just mail us this question, I mean, we'll connect you with the right expert. We're just over time, so I would thank all of the panelists. Maksud from CommEngine, Rohit from Legitquest, and then we have Lakshman from Neverinstall. Thank you so much, and a very enlightening discussion. And we'll soon, as there is a form, so let us know how did it go, what are the topics we should cover, and you will soon hear back from us. So thank you so much, all of the panelists for your insight, and hope to see you in the next edition of Scale Up Thursdays. Thank you, everyone.
Sure. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you, Vinayak.
guys.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Vinayak.
Rohit.
Great
Have a
talking to you
nice
guys.